At brunch, my daughter-in-law said, "We've decided not to invite you for Christmas." I just nodded. But when I canceled the catering and stopped paying the mortgage, suddenly everyone had time to call me. I never expected those words to come out of Jennifer's mouth with such casual cruelty. The elegant restaurant around us continued buzzing with Sunday conversation, but in my little corner of the world, everything went silent. My son David stared at his plate, avoiding my eyes. "Mom, it's just that we want something more intimate this year," he finally mumbled, still not looking at me. I wrapped my fingers around my water glass, focusing on the coolness against my skin to ground myself. "I understand," I said, though I didn't. Not really. How could I understand being excluded from Christmas when I'd spent the last 5 years making their celebrations possible? Since Robert died, I'd been the invisible hand keeping their perfect life afloat. The mortgage on their Tudor-style home that they couldn't actually afford, the catering for their lavish holiday parties where Jennifer paraded around like the perfect hostess, the private school tuition for my grandchildren that they insisted was necessary for networking. None of it would exist without me, but they didn't know that. I'd made sure of it. "It's just that Jennifer's college friends are coming with their families and the house will be full," David added, his voice casual, almost apologetic, as if logistics made exclusion more acceptable. Like overbooking a hotel room justified turning your own mother away for the holidays. He didn't meet my eyes when he said it, instead watching the server pour another mimosa. He thought that made it better. That if he framed it as a matter of space, of numbers, of head counts and guest lists, it wouldn't sting the way it did. But it did sting. It always did. Jennifer nodded in agreement, her meticulously styled blonde hair catching the light, bobbing with performative enthusiasm. "We'll do something with you after the holidays, Martha." "Maybe in January," she said, her smile polite but thin, like the plastic wrap stretched over a dish you're not really planning to eat. Her tone was breezy, dismissive, like I was an errand to pencil in, a task to cross off once the main event had passed, an obligation rather than an invitation, a footnote to their celebration. I forced a smile, a careful, measured smile that said all the right things. "That's fine, I understand. I'm not hurt." "That sounds lovely," I said, even though it sounded like exile. The rest of brunch passed in a muted haze, a performance I knew by heart. I asked all the right questions about the grandchildren's recent school projects and weekend soccer games. I complimented Jennifer's new highlights, the fresh manicure, the statement necklace I suspected cost more than my monthly groceries. I laughed at David's safe little anecdotes about the office, nodded at stories about their friends' ski trips, and reacted appropriately to photos of artisan holiday cookies baked with their Christmas crew. I played the part I always had. The good mother, the easy grandmother, the woman who never asked for much, who never made waves, who smiled through the discomfort, who never made anyone feel guilty or obligated, who never questioned being left out, just accepted it gracefully and kept giving. As David drove me home to my modest 2-bedroom condo, the one I had downsized into quietly without fuss after Robert died, the silence in the car pressed in around us, thick, uncomfortable. He didn't put on the radio. He didn't fill the quiet with chatter. We simply sat in it. When he pulled into my driveway, he left the engine running. I glanced at the dashboard clock. Not even 2 p.m. He didn't reach to turn off the ignition or make any move to walk me to the door. The signal was clear. This was a drop-off, not a visit. "Thanks for brunch," I said softly, collecting my purse, my coat, my practiced composure. "Mom," he started, his hand gripping the steering wheel a little tighter, but the sentence didn't land. He paused, hesitated. For a flicker of a moment, I thought he might say something real, something human, an apology, a glimmer of recognition, a crack in the facade that might let some love through. Instead, he cleared his throat. "We'll call you about January, okay?" I nodded. "Sure, just let me know." I stepped out of the car and closed the door gently, not slamming it, not lingering. He didn't wait to see me go inside. The car reversed before I reached the porch, and I heard the hum of the engine fade down the street before I'd even found my keys. Inside, I moved through the motions of the rest of my Sunday like a wind-up doll. I changed into my soft clothes, sweatpants and Robert's old cardigan. I made a cup of chamomile tea I barely tasted. I sat in his chair by the window and watched the sunlight filter through the thin curtains, painting slow golden patterns on the carpet. The room was quiet. Too quiet. They don't want me for Christmas, Robert, I said into the stillness, my voice barely more than a whisper. After everything I've done for them, I'm not even worth a chair at the table. The truth of it landed with a dull thud in my chest. Not invited, not welcome, not needed. My eyes drifted to the desk in the corner, specifically to the drawer where I kept the folder. That plain, worn folder filled with quiet sacrifices, printed bank statements, automatic transfer receipts, years of financial lifelines they never even knew had my name on them. 5 years of covering their mortgage, $3,200 every single month, just so they could stay in a house far above their means. Another $1,200 for the children's private school tuition, because Jennifer said public school would limit their potential. I'd paid for groceries when David was out of work, for car repairs when Jennifer insisted they needed a new SUV, despite having more debt than savings, and never once had I said it was from me. Not directly. I let them believe David's struggling investment firm had miraculously become solvent after Robert's death. I let them pretend they were pulling it off on their own, because I knew they needed that illusion. I knew that pride was the scaffolding holding up their fragile image of success. But pride doesn't put food on the table. Pride doesn't cover orthodontics or ballet lessons, and it certainly doesn't pay for extravagant Christmas catering for 30 people. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. The familiar dashboard greeted me, and I clicked to review upcoming transactions. There it was, the automatic transfer for next month's mortgage payment, scheduled for the 1st, just 3 days away. My hand hovered over the mouse. 5 years, 60 months, 60 silent payments, 60 times I had chosen them over myself, over comfort, over independence. Would I really stop now? Just then, my phone buzzed. A text message preview lit up the screen. Jennifer. David forgot to ask. We're doing the usual Christmas catering from Yepes. Can you handle that again this year? Even though you won't be there, we'd really appreciate it. Same as last year, for 30 people. No, please. No, thank you. No, sorry, we won't see you. Just an assumption, an order, really, like I was the holiday assistant, not the woman who had built the very life they were now living. Something inside me, long stretched and fraying, snapped. I clicked Cancel Transfer. Then I opened my email and composed a short, clear message to Yepes Catering. Please cancel the holiday order for the Thompsons scheduled for December 24th. The account will no longer be responsible for the payment. Regards, Martha. Then I logged into the private school's parent portal, a place I had never belonged but had paid through, and removed my billing authorization. With a deep breath, I closed the laptop. I picked up my cooling tea, now forgotten but comforting in its warmth, and carried it back to Robert's chair. And I sat. Not angry, not even sad, just still. For the first time in years, I felt a quiet, steady peace fill my chest. The kind that comes when you finally stop breaking yourself to hold others up. When you value yourself enough to say no more. They had made their decision, to exclude me from their table. Now I had made mine, to stop funding a fantasy that erased me in the process. I wasn't their bank, I wasn't their background character, and I would no longer be their silent salvation. Christmas would look different this year, and for once I would be spending it with the one person who had been forgotten for far too long. Me. It took exactly 3 days for my phone to start ringing. The first call came from David, of course. I let it go to voicemail. Mom, there must be some mistake with the school. They called saying the tuition payment was declined. Call me back. His voice held no concern for me, just confusion about the money. 2 hours later, Jennifer called. Martha, it's Jennifer. Yepes says you canceled the Christmas catering. There must be some misunderstanding. Call me ASAP. Again, no. How are you? No, is everything okay? Just panic about their holiday plans falling apart. I sat in Robert's chair, watching my phone light up throughout the day. By evening, I had 12 missed calls and 8 voicemails, each more urgent than the last. I turned my phone off and poured myself a glass of wine. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't rush to solve their problems. Instead, I pulled out an old photo album from the bookshelf. Robert and I on our wedding day, so young and full of hope. David as a toddler, riding on his father's shoulders, family vacations where we'd pinched pennies to create memories. When had it all changed? When had I become nothing more than a financial safety net? After Robert's sudden heart attack, everything shifted. I was 63, suddenly alone in our 4-bedroom colonial house that felt too empty. too full of ghosts. David and Jennifer swooped in with what seemed like concern. "Mom, you shouldn't be in this big house alone," David had said, sitting at my kitchen table a month after the funeral. "It's too much to maintain." Jennifer nodded, her face a mask of sympathy. "We've been looking at houses in Oakwood Estates. It's a beautiful neighborhood with excellent schools for the kids, but with the market the way it is." I knew what was coming before they asked. They wanted the house, my house, as a down payment for their dream home, a house they couldn't afford on David's struggling investment firm salary and Jennifer's part-time work as a real estate agent. "You could move into something smaller," Jennifer suggested. "There are those nice condos by the lake. You'd have no yard to maintain, and the community has activities for seniors." Seniors, the word stung. I was a widow, not an invalid, but I agreed. I sold the house Robert and I had lovingly renovated over 30 years, gave the proceeds to David and Jennifer for their down payment, and moved into a modest condo that cost a third of what our home had been worth. I told myself it was the right thing to do, that David and the grandchildren deserved the stability, that Robert would have wanted them to have a good life. What I didn't expect was how quickly I'd be forgotten once the papers were signed. The first few months, they invited me over regularly. Sunday dinners, school plays, soccer games. I was included, if not central, but slowly the invitations dwindled. Jennifer began making comments about my clothes. "Don't you have something more current, Martha? My cooking?" "The kids are used to organic now," my opinions. That's a very outdated way of thinking. Then came the financial requests, small at first. "Dad's life insurance paid out well, right, Mom?" David asked one day. "My firm is having a temporary cash flow issue. Could you help us this month with the mortgage just until my commission comes through?" 1 month turned into 2, then 6, then permanent. I never said no. I never mentioned that the life insurance barely covered my own expenses and that I was dipping into my retirement savings to help them. I never revealed that their temporary financial problems were costing me my security. Meanwhile, Jennifer's expectations grew. The children needed private school connections. The house needed a renovation to keep up with neighbors. Christmas had to be catered because everyone in their circle had professional holiday dinners. Each time I received a request, always framed as temporary, always presented as essential, I transferred the money silently. No questions asked, no recognition expected. Last Christmas had been the breaking point, though I hadn't realized it then. I'd spent weeks choosing perfect gifts for everyone: a cashmere sweater for Jennifer, golf clubs for David, thoughtfully selected toys for each grandchild. I'd arrived early to help set up, bringing homemade cookies from Robert's mother's recipe. Jennifer had taken one look at the cookies and said, "Oh, we don't need those. The caterer is bringing petits fours." My cookies were relegated to the kitchen, never served. My gifts were opened with cursory thanks before everyone moved on to the main event, the extravagant presents David and Jennifer gave the children, presents I had unknowingly financed. During dinner, I was seated at the far end of the table away from the children, beside Jennifer's hard-of-hearing uncle. I could barely participate in the conversation. When I tried to share a Christmas memory of Robert, Jennifer quickly changed the subject. "Let's keep things upbeat, shall we?" she'd said with a tight smile. I'd driven home that night with tears in my eyes, but still, I transferred the money for January's mortgage payment the next day. Still, I continued the cycle. Until now. I closed the photo album and walked to my desk. I pulled out the folder containing 5 years of financial records: bank transfers, tuition payments, catering receipts, cash loans that were never repaid. All totaled, I'd given them over $275,000 since Robert died, more than half of my retirement savings. For what? To be excluded from Christmas? To be treated as an ATM rather than a mother and grandmother? My phone started ringing again. This time I answered. "Mom," David's voice was tight with panic. "What's going on? The mortgage company called. They said the payment didn't come through." "That's right," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "What do you mean, that's right? There must be some mistake." "No mistake, David. I've decided not to make the payment this month." Silence. "Then, Mom, what are you talking about? You know we're counting on that help? Like I was counting on being included in Christmas?" The words came out before I could stop them. "Is that what this is about? You're punishing us because we wanted one Christmas to ourselves? That's childish, Mom." I felt a flash of anger, hot and clarifying. Childish? I've paid your mortgage for 5 years, David. I've paid your children's tuition. I funded your lifestyle, all without recognition, all without thanks. And the one time I expect to be included in a family holiday, I'm cast aside as an inconvenience. Mom, that's not. It is, David, and I'm done. I've helped you build a life you can't afford, and in return, you've pushed me further and further to the margins of that life. Not anymore. So you're just cutting us off? Over a Christmas invitation? His voice rose. What about the kids? Their school? Our house? Those are your responsibilities, David, not mine. I've enabled this situation for too long, and it stops now. You can't do this. We have payments due, plans made. I just did, I said softly and hung up. My hands were shaking, but for the first time in years, I felt something like freedom, the weight of secret responsibility lifting from my shoulders. My phone immediately rang again, Jennifer this time. I let it go to voicemail. Martha, this is completely unacceptable. David told me what you said. You can't just pull the rug out from under us because you're feeling left out. You're being selfish and petty. Call us back immediately. Selfish? Petty? For 5 years, I'd sacrificed my financial security, my retirement dreams, even my self-respect to keep them afloat. And I was the selfish one? I turned off my phone again and walked to the balcony of my condo. The December air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine from the small Christmas tree I'd set up in my living room, a modest tree for my modest life. But it was mine. In the morning, I would call my financial advisor. I would reclaim what was left of my retirement. I would finally start living for myself. And perhaps in the distance, I would start looking for a small house by the sea. Something Robert and I had always dreamed about, but never achieved. A place where the sound of waves could drown out the noise of ungrateful children and entitled in-laws. A place where I could finally be Martha again, not just David's mother or Jennifer's ATM. Tomorrow would bring more calls, more demands, more guilt. But tonight, watching the stars appear one by one in the winter sky, I felt at peace with my decision. For the first time in 5 years, I chose myself, and it felt right. The next morning, I woke to 27 missed calls and a dozen text messages. I scrolled through them briefly, noting the escalating urgency. Mom, we need to talk about this. Martha, you're being ridiculous. The school is threatening to withhold the kids' registration for next semester. Mom, please call us back. This isn't fair. Fair? The word lingered in my mind as I made my morning coffee. What exactly was fair about our relationship these past 5 years? I called my financial advisor, Richard, who had been Robert's friend for decades. He answered on the second ring. Martha, good to hear from you. What can I do for you today? I need to make some changes, Richard. Significant ones. An hour later, I sat in his office as he reviewed my financial situation, his expression growing increasingly concerned. Martha, you've withdrawn nearly 60% of your retirement savings in 5 years. At this rate, you'll be completely out of funds in another 4 years. I nodded, unsurprised but still feeling the weight of those numbers. These regular transfers to David's account, $3,200 monthly, that's more than most mortgages in this area. It is their mortgage, I said quietly. Richard looked up sharply. You've been paying their entire mortgage? Does David know that's coming from your retirement funds? He knows it's coming from me. He doesn't know I'm draining my savings to do it. Richard removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Martha, this isn't sustainable. Not for you. I know. That's why I'm here. I need to stop all automatic transfers, and I need to figure out how to make what's left last for the rest of my life. We spent the next 2 hours restructuring my finances. By the time I left Richard's office, I had a clear picture of my situation. It wasn't as dire as it could have been. I still had my condo, paid for with the small portion of the house sale I'd kept for myself. I had about 40% of my retirement savings left. If I was careful, if I made smart choices, I could still have a comfortable, if modest, life. The sense of relief was overwhelming. My next stop was the bank, where I formally canceled all automatic transfers to David's accounts. The banker asked if there was a problem. No, I said, just a long overdue correction. On the way home, I drove past a real estate office. On impulse, I pulled over and went inside. A young agent greeted me warmly. I'm looking for information on small coastal properties, I said. Nothing fancy, just peaceful. Retiring to the beach? She asked with a smile. Something like that. She pulled up some listings on her computer. There's a small development in Sea Pines. It's a retirement community, but not one of those institutional feeling places. Individual cottages, community center, beach access. Very quiet, very charming. I looked at the photos of small, neat cottages with wraparound porches, blue water visible in the distance, palm trees swaying in the breeze. It's about 2 hours from here, she continued. Close enough for family visits, far enough for peace. Family visits? Would there be any after what I'd done? The thought gave me pause, but not enough to change my mind. I'd like to see them, I decided. Can we arrange a visit for this weekend? Back at my condo, I finally turned my phone back on. The barrage was immediate. 3 new voicemails, all from Jennifer. Martha, this is completely unacceptable. The mortgage company has sent a late notice. David is beside himself. How could you do this to your own son? If you don't call us back by tonight, we're coming over. This is outrageous. I deleted them all without responding. Then I went to my bedroom closet and pulled out the suitcase I'd used for my last vacation with Robert 5 years ago. We'd gone to Maine, stayed in a little bed and breakfast overlooking the Atlantic. It had been perfect. I began packing a few essentials for my weekend trip to Sea Pines. As I folded a sweater, I heard a sharp knocking at my door. So they'd made good on their threat, earlier than expected but not surprising. I took a deep breath and went to answer. David stood there, his face flushed with anger. Jennifer hovered behind him, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" David demanded, pushing past me into the living room. I closed the door calmly. "Hello to you too, David." "Don't hello to you to us," Jennifer snapped. "You know why we're here?" I gestured to the sofa. "Why don't you sit down?" "I don't want to sit down," David said. "I want to know why you've suddenly cut us off without warning. The mortgage is due, the school needs tuition, and Yepes won't reschedule our Christmas catering this late." I looked at my son, truly looked at him, and saw a stranger. A 42-year-old man who had never learned to live within his means, who had taken his mother's generosity for granted, who stood in my living room not with concern for my well-being, but with indignation that his lifestyle was being threatened. "I've made some financial decisions," I said evenly. "I can no longer support your household expenses." "Can't or won't?" Jennifer challenged. "Both." David ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. "Mom, if this is about Christmas—" "It's not just about Christmas," I interrupted. "It's about 5 years of being treated like an ATM rather than a mother. It's about sacrificing my security for your lifestyle. It's about being pushed further and further from your lives while still being expected to fund them." Jennifer's face contorted with indignation. "That's completely unfair. We've always included you." "Have you?" I asked quietly. "When was the last time you called me just to chat, not to ask for money? When was the last time you brought the children over just to visit, not because you needed a free babysitter? When was the last time you acknowledged any of my contributions to your life?" David shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, we've been busy. You know how it is with the kids and work? Not too busy to plan an elaborate Christmas party that I'm paying for but not invited to," I pointed out. "It's just one Christmas," Jennifer exclaimed. "You're acting like we've banished you forever." I stood up, suddenly weary of the conversation. "I've made my decision. I can't continue supporting you financially. I need to secure what's left of my retirement." "What's left?" David's expression changed. "Mom, are you having money problems?" For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine concern in his eyes, but it was too little, too late. "I've spent over half of my retirement savings supporting your family, David. That stops now." Jennifer gasped. "Half? That's impossible." "It's just been the mortgage and a few expenses." I walked to my desk and retrieved the folder of financial records. "Here, every transfer, every payment, every loan that was never repaid, 5 years' worth. $276,340 to be exact." David took the folder with shaking hands. He flipped through the pages, his face growing paler with each one. "Mom, I had no idea it was this much." "Of course you didn't. You never asked. You just took." Jennifer peered over his shoulder, her expression hardening. "Well, it was your choice to help us. No one forced you." "Jennifer!" David shot her a warning look. "What? It's true. If she's going to hold it over our heads, she shouldn't have offered." "I didn't offer," I said calmly. "You asked, repeatedly. And yes, I chose to help. That was my mistake. I'm correcting it now. David closed the folder, looking dazed. What are we supposed to do? We can't afford the mortgage on our own, the kids' school. Those are decisions you'll have to make as a family, I said. Downsize, transfer to public school, get second jobs, do what millions of other families do, live within your means. Jennifer's face flushed with anger. So that's it? You're just abandoning us because you didn't get a Christmas invitation? I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm simply stopping the financial support. You're welcome to visit me anytime. As family, not as financial dependents. They left an hour later, the folder of financial records clutched in David's hands. Neither of them hugged me goodbye. Jennifer didn't even look at me as they walked out. David paused at the door, his expression a mix of anger, confusion, and something that might have been shame. "This isn't over, Mom," he said quietly. "I know," I replied. After they left, I finished packing for my weekend trip to Sea Pines. The real estate agent had confirmed our appointment for Saturday morning. I found myself looking forward to it with unexpected excitement, the first trip I'd planned just for myself in years. Friday morning, I loaded my suitcase into my car and set off for the coast, leaving my phone behind on purpose. 2 hours of driving with just the radio for company felt liberating. No demands, no guilt trips, no financial emergencies to solve. Sea Pines was everything the photos had promised. A quiet community of pastel-colored cottages nestled among swaying palms. The real estate agent, Brenda, met me at the community center, a cheerful building with a library, game room, and small cafe. "We have 3 available units," she explained as we walked the palm-lined streets, all single-story, 2 bedrooms with screened porches and small gardens. The first cottage was pale yellow with white trim, set back from the road. Inside, sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating hardwood floors and an open floor plan. The kitchen was small but efficient, the living room cozy with built-in bookshelves. "The master bedroom has a view of the water," Brenda said, leading me through. I stepped into the bedroom and caught my breath. Through the large window, I could see past the community's walking path to the blue expanse of the Atlantic. The sound of waves drifted in on the breeze. "It's perfect," I whispered. "Would you like to see the others?" Brenda asked. "No, this one feels right." We discussed the details over lunch at the community cafe. The price was reasonable, well within what I could afford with my remaining savings, especially if I sold my condo. The monthly association fee covered all exterior maintenance, landscaping, and access to community amenities. "Many of our residents are in similar situations," Brenda mentioned as we sipped iced tea. "Starting fresh after life changes." "Divorces?" I asked. "Some. Others are widowed. Some just decided they were tired of living for everyone else." She smiled knowingly. "Family dynamics can be complicated." I thought of David and Jennifer, of the chaos I'd left behind. "Yes," I said, "they can." I didn't make an offer that day. I wanted to think it through carefully, but I knew in my heart I'd found my new home. As I drove back to my condo on Sunday evening, I felt a sense of possibility I hadn't experienced since Robert died. My answering machine was blinking furiously when I returned. 14 messages. I pressed play, bracing myself. The first few were from David and Jennifer, their tones ranging from angry to pleading. "Mom, we need to talk about this. Call me back." "Martha, you're being unreasonable. The children will be devastated if we have to move." "Mom, please call us back. This isn't fair." "Fair?" The word lingered in my mind. Then came one from my sister, Ellen. "Martha, what's going on?" "David called me in a panic saying you've cut them off. Call me when you get this." 2 from friends who'd apparently also heard from David. Then unexpectedly, one from my 12-year-old granddaughter, Emma. "Grandma, it's Emma. Mom and Dad are fighting a lot. They say we might have to move or change schools. Dad said it's because you're mad at them. Are you mad at me too? Please call me back." My heart clenched. Emma, the quiet one who always had her nose in a book, so much like I had been at her age, the one who still hugged me enthusiastically at family gatherings, who asked about my garden and remembered my birthday. No, I wasn't mad at Emma or her 9-year-old brother, Jack. They were innocent in all this. I picked up the phone and dialed Emma's number, hoping she had her own phone and not just access to her parents. "Grandma?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Hello, sweetheart, I got your message. Are you mad at us?" "No, Emma, not at you or Jack, never at you." "Then why won't you help Mom and Dad anymore?" They said we might have to sell the house and that I can't go to Westlake Academy next year. I sighed, trying to find words a 12-year-old could understand. Sometimes adults make decisions that aren't good for them in the long run. Your parents have been depending on me in ways that aren't healthy for any of us. Because you give them money? Smart girl. Yes, because I give them money. Money I need for my own future. Oh. She was quiet for a moment. Dad never said it was your money, he just said you always helped. I know, sweetheart. Are you still coming for Christmas? The innocent question caught me off guard. I wasn't invited this year, Emma. What? But you always come for Christmas. Who's going to make the snowflake cookies? Despite everything, I smiled. Your mom told me you all prefer the caterer's desserts. That's not true. Your cookies are the best part. Mom just says that because she can't bake. I laughed, genuinely laughed for the first time in days. Grandma, can I still come see you even if we move? Of course you can, anytime. In fact, I might be moving too. To a pretty place by the ocean? Really? Can I visit you there? I would love that, Emma. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet living room thinking. I couldn't go back on my decision. David and Jennifer needed to learn financial independence, but the children shouldn't suffer for their parents' mistakes. Perhaps there was a middle path. The following Wednesday, my sister Ellen showed up at my door unannounced. We need to talk, she said, brushing past me into the living room. David called me 3 times this week. He says you've gone off the deep end. I sighed, closing the door. Hello to you too, Ellen. She turned to face me, arms crossed. At 66, Ellen was still the image of our mother. Tall, angular, with a no-nonsense expression that could wither flowers. Martha, what's going on? David says you've cut them off completely. That they might lose their house over a Christmas invitation? I gestured for her to sit. Would you like some tea? I don't want tea, I want an explanation. I sat down anyway, smoothing my skirt. It's not about Christmas, Ellen, that was just the final straw. Slowly, I explained the situation. The 5 years of financial support, the gradual exclusion from their lives, the steady drain on my retirement savings. Ellen's expression shifted from skepticism to concern as I spoke. I had no idea, she admitted finally. David always said his investment business was doing well. He wanted everyone to believe that, including himself perhaps. Ellen leaned forward. But Martha, their family. If they need help, they need to learn to stand on their own feet, I said firmly. I've enabled their financial irresponsibility for too long. It has to stop. And the children? What about them? I thought of Emma's voice on the phone. I'm considering setting up education funds for Emma and Jack, but directly for their education, not through David and Jennifer. Ellen nodded slowly. That's actually quite reasonable. She paused. David didn't mention you'd been paying their mortgage for 5 years. I'm not surprised. It's easier to paint me as the villain than admit the truth. We talked for another hour. By the time Ellen left, she had a clearer picture of the situation and was considerably less critical of my decision. You've always been the soft touch, she said as she hugged me goodbye. It's about time you stood up for yourself. 2 days later, I received a formal letter from a lawyer representing David and Jennifer. They were demanding I continue the financial support, claiming I had created a dependency and had an obligation to maintain their standard of living. I called Richard immediately. He laughed when I read him the letter. That's not how the law works, he assured me. You have no legal obligation to support your adult son's lifestyle. I'll have our legal department send a response. The letter was a new low, even for them. Trying to legally force me to continue funding their extravagance. It was beyond entitled. It was delusional. I spent the next week finalizing my plans. I made an offer on the yellow cottage in Sea Pines, which was accepted. I listed my condo with a local real estate agent. I consulted with Richard about setting up education trusts for Emma and Jack, and I waited for the inevitable confrontation that I knew was coming. It arrived on a Sunday afternoon. I was sorting through belongings, deciding what to keep and what to donate for my upcoming move, when the doorbell rang insistently. I opened it to find David, Jennifer, and both children standing on my doorstep. Emma immediately broke away from her parents and hugged me. Grandma, I missed you. I hugged her back, my heart warming. I missed you too, sweetheart. Jack hung back, looking uncertain. At 9, he was more susceptible to his parents' moods, and their tension was palpable. Can we come in? David asked stiffly. I nodded, stepping aside. Of course. Jennifer marched in, her eyes immediately taking in the boxes scattered around my living room. What's all this? I'm moving, I said simply. David's head snapped up. Moving where? Sea Pines. It's a coastal community about 2 hours from here. You didn't tell us you were moving? Jennifer accused. I wasn't aware I needed your permission, I replied mildly. Emma looked around at the boxes. Is your new house by the ocean like you said, Grandma? I smiled at her. Yes, it is. You can hear the waves from the bedroom window. Cool, Jack finally spoke, his curiosity overcoming his caution. Can we visit? Of course you can, I said, ignoring Jennifer's tight expression. Anytime, children, Jennifer said sharply. Go watch TV in Grandma's bedroom while we talk. But Mom, Emma began. Now, Emma. The children reluctantly retreated to my bedroom. Once they were gone, Jennifer rounded on me. So this is your solution? Running away to the beach while we lose everything? I met her gaze steadily. I'm not running away. I'm making a choice about how to spend my retirement years, just as you and David need to make choices about your finances. We got another notice from the mortgage company, David said, his voice low. And the school won't let the kids register for next year unless we pay the outstanding balance. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. Not for them, but for Emma and Jack. Sorry? Jennifer's voice rose. You did this to us. No, Jennifer, you did this to yourselves. You chose to live beyond your means. You chose to rely on my support rather than adjust your lifestyle. Those were your choices, not mine. David sank onto the sofa, head in his hands. We can't afford the house without your help, Mom. We'll have to sell. The kids will have to change schools. Everything we've built, everything I paid for, I corrected gently. He looked up, his expression pained. Yes, everything you paid for. Is that what you want to hear? That we've been living off your generosity? Fine, we have been. But cutting us off without warning. The warning was 5 years in the making, David. Every time you treated me like an ATM rather than a mother. Every time you excluded me from family decisions while expecting me to fund them. The Christmas exclusion was just the final signal that I needed to stop enabling this dynamic. Jennifer paced the room, agitated. So that's it? You're punishing us because we wanted one Christmas to ourselves? I shook my head. This isn't punishment, Jennifer. It's a correction. I've consulted with my financial advisor. At the rate I was supporting you, I would have been completely out of savings within 4 years. What then? Would you have supported me? The question hung in the air. David and Jennifer exchanged glances but didn't answer. That's what I thought, I said quietly. What about the children? David asked. They didn't do anything wrong. No, they didn't. That's why I'm setting up education trusts for both of them. The money will go directly to their tuition, not through you or Jennifer. Jennifer's eyes widened. You're still paying for their school? I'm ensuring they have educational opportunities. That's different from bankrolling your lifestyle. David looked up, a mix of relief and shame on his face. Mom, I thank you for the kids. It was the first genuine gratitude I'd heard from him in years. There are conditions, I continued. The trust will cover their education through college, provided they maintain certain grade standards, but it doesn't cover extracurriculars, uniforms, or other expenses. Those are your responsibility as parents. Jennifer looked like she wanted to argue, but thought better of it. The offer was too generous to refuse, even with conditions. What about the house? David asked. That's your decision to make. If you can't afford it, selling might be the responsible choice. But David, I interrupted gently, you're 42 years old. It's time to stand on your own feet, both of you. He fell silent, the truth of my words finally sinking in. From my bedroom, I could hear Emma and Jack laughing at something on TV. The sound reminded me of what was really important here. Not the house, not the prestige, but the family bonds that had been stretched so thin. The children are welcome to visit me anytime, I said. And so are you, as family, not as financial dependents. David nodded slowly. I understand. Jennifer looked less convinced, but she remained silent. It wasn't a perfect resolution. There were still hurt feelings, still adjustments to be made. But it was a start. A start to a new chapter where I valued myself enough to say no, and where maybe, just maybe, they would learn to value me for more than my checkbook. 3 months later, I stood on the screened porch of my little yellow cottage, wrapped in a soft cardigan, a steaming mug of tea in my hands, and watched the first golden light of morning stretch across the Atlantic horizon. The sun emerged slowly, casting long shadows over the dunes and sending shimmering reflections across the surface of the water. This moment, quiet, unhurried mine, had become part of my new rhythm, one that nourished me in ways I hadn't realized I was starving for. Sea Pines had become more than just a new address. It had become a sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe without obligation pressing on my chest. Unlike my old high-rise condo, this place felt like home. The streets were quieter, the people warmer. The community was filled with others who, like me, were in the process of reshaping their lives. Retired professionals, widows and widowers, empty nesters, people healing from divorce or loss, all trying to find a second chapter that felt more like themselves. In this little town, I'd found something I hadn't expected: connection. I joined a weekly book club at the community center, and every Thursday evening we gathered, a group of curious, chatty, opinionated readers, over coffee and lemon bars to discuss thrillers, biographies, and the occasional romance. I'd also taken up watercolor painting, something I'd always dreamed of doing but had pushed aside for decades with the phrase, maybe someday. Now, every Tuesday morning, I sat at the easel near my sunroom window, trying to capture the changing hues of the sea or the tangled beauty of the garden just beyond my porch. Even more surprisingly, I'd made real friends. Harriet, the retired librarian next door, kept my nightstand stocked with whodunits and historical fiction. She had a dry wit and a fondness for Earl Grey tea, and we often swapped life stories over jigsaw puzzles on rainy afternoons. On the other side lived Ben, a widower in his 70s who tended a vegetable garden with quiet devotion. We'd bonded over tomatoes, compost techniques, and a shared appreciation for silence that didn't feel empty. My phone chimed, breaking the stillness. I glanced down at the screen and saw a message from Emma. "Grandma, can we still come this weekend?" "Dad says yes, but Mom is being weird about it." I smiled, feeling a familiar warmth rise in my chest. "Of course," I texted back. "I can't wait to see you." So much had changed in those 3 months. David and Jennifer had finally sold the Tudor house, that grand, echoing structure that had once been a symbol of status, but had become a monument to stress. They'd moved into a smaller, more manageable home in a modest neighborhood. Gone were the manicured lawns and gated drives. Their new street had bicycles on porches and chalk drawings on sidewalks, and somehow they were better for it. David had let go of his struggling private investment practice and taken a stable position at an established firm, a quieter job with regular hours and a predictable salary. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave him something he hadn't had in years: peace of mind. Jennifer, too, had shifted gears. She began working full-time at her real estate agency, no longer treating it as a fashionable side project, but as a genuine career. The sudden need to rely on their own income had forced both of them to reassess their priorities. The children had enrolled in the local public school. Emma had been heartbroken at first, leaving behind her private academy and her tight-knit circle of friends, but she'd adapted quickly. She'd earned a spot in the advanced literature program and was thriving, diving into classics and writing short stories of her own. Jack had adjusted even more seamlessly. The public school's robotics club had become his new favorite place, and his teachers raved about his curiosity and collaboration. As for David and me, our relationship, once strained to the point of silence, was slowly beginning to heal. Our weekly phone calls, which had started out awkward and guarded, were now longer, more open, peppered with humor and the kind of honesty we hadn't shared in years. He'd finally acknowledged, without my prompting, without excuses, how deeply I had sacrificed for them. His apology had been clumsy, as if the words themselves were foreign in his mouth, but it had been real, and it had meant everything. Jennifer, on the other hand, remained distant. She was civil but reserved, polite but cold. There was a tightness in her smile when we spoke, an undercurrent of resentment she hadn't yet unlearned. She rarely joined our video calls and hadn't visited my cottage even once. I tried not to dwell on it. Healing doesn't happen on the same timeline for everyone. And some relationships, I reminded myself gently, may never heal at all. And that had to be okay. The doorbell rang, cutting through my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, there stood David, alone. David, I said, surprised. What a surprise. I wasn't expecting you until the weekend with the children. He shifted uncomfortably on the porch, holding a small paper bag, maybe pastries, and glanced past me into the house. I know, I wanted to come early, just to talk. Just us. Of course, I said, stepping aside. Come in. He walked slowly through the front hallway, taking in the space. The cottage was nothing like my old life. No sleek granite countertops or minimalist decor. This place had personality. It was bright and homey, filled with soft blues and seafoam greens, with overstuffed chairs and art supplies on the dining table. My watercolor paintings, some decent, some laughably bad, hung alongside family photographs. Emma chasing gulls on the beach, Jack building sandcastles, me holding a trowel in the garden with dirt on my cheek. This is nice, Mom, David said after a moment, almost shyly. It suits you. Thank you, I replied, meaning it. I really love it here. It feels like me. We settled in the living room with fresh coffee. He cradled the mug between both hands, staring down into the steam, clearly gathering his thoughts. I let the silence stretch, giving him space. How's the new job? I eventually asked, gently prompting. Good, he said with a small nod. Steady, predictable, less pressure than trying to run my own show. It's not as exciting, maybe, but I'm not lying awake at night anymore. He paused, then set the cup down carefully, as if bracing for something. Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few months. Oh, I said, watching his expression. He exhaled slowly. At first, I was angry, really angry. I felt like you'd blindsided us, like you'd pulled the rug out from under us when we needed you most. He looked up at me, then away again. But then I started doing the books, really doing them. I went through our statements, added it all up, looked at our spending habits, and I realized something that I should have realized years ago. His voice faltered, and he shook his head, jaw tight. We were living in a fantasy. Everything. The house, the private schools, the vacations, the clothes, the constant spending. It was all an illusion. We couldn't afford that life. Not really. We were chasing an image, trying to keep up appearances. Jennifer was trying to match her friends, and I was trying to match my colleagues. I thought I was giving my family everything, but what I was really doing was running us into the ground. I nodded softly, not with judgment, but understanding. It wasn't sustainable, I said. No, he echoed, it wasn't. And I let you carry the weight. You paid the price so we could keep pretending, and I told myself it was temporary, that I'd pay you back someday. But the truth is, I never even asked if you were okay. He looked me straight in the eye, his voice low but unwavering. I'm sorry, Mom, truly. I'm sorry I put you in that position. I'm sorry I expected you to rescue us over and over again. And I'm sorry I didn't see you, really see you, until you stopped. Tears threatened to prick my eyes, but I blinked them away. It's okay, I said quietly. You're seeing now. That's what matters. The apology hung in the air between us, unadorned, simple, and yet heavier than any long-winded explanation could ever have been. It wasn't elaborate, but in its brevity, it carried a weight that filled the quiet room. Thank you, David, I said, my voice soft but firm. That means a lot to me. David looked away for a moment, then back at me, his expression uncharacteristically raw. The thing is, he began, and I could hear the tension in his voice as he pushed past his pride. I never really understood how much you were giving up all those years. I just assumed you had enough savings, enough income, enough support that it didn't really affect you. You never asked, I said, not accusingly, but truthfully. He gave a slow, regretful nod. No, I didn't. I didn't ask because I didn't want to know, and I didn't want to face the possibility that your help came at a cost to you. He exhaled sharply and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. I never thought about the long term, what it meant for your future, your retirement, your freedom. That was selfish. I only saw the short-term ease it gave us, not the long-term burden it created for you. I reached over and gently squeezed his hand. It was the first time in years that physical contact between us had felt meaningful, not just obligatory. We both made mistakes, I said. I should have been more transparent. I kept too much to myself, assumed you'd understand, assumed you'd see what it was costing me without me having to say it. But he shook his head. No, Mom, this one's on me. You gave, and I took. Even if I tried to convince myself that it was mutual or temporary, deep down I knew I was leaning on you too hard. I was taking advantage, even if I didn't want to admit it to myself at the time. What followed was an hour-long conversation that peeled away years of silent resentment, misunderstanding, and emotional distance. It was the most honest we had been with each other in a very long time. David shared openly about the changes they had made since I stopped the financial support. They had downsized to a more modest home, learned to budget, and for the first time, they were truly living within their means instead of stretching beyond them. It wasn't easy, he admitted. We had to let go of a lot of things we thought were essential, but we've adjusted. We're managing. His voice softened as he continued. The kids, they're actually doing better. Their new school has programs the old one didn't. They've made friends quickly, and they just seem lighter, happier somehow. I think they were feeling our stress more than we realized. Children are perceptive that way, I said, a bittersweet smile tugging at my lips. He nodded. Emma talks about you all the time. She's counting down the days until this weekend. Honestly, I'm looking forward to it too. There was a pause. Then he added a little hesitantly, Jennifer might come this time. She's trying. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. After David left to check into his hotel, I sat back on the porch, the conversation replaying in my mind. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was real, authentic. We hadn't swept anything under the rug. For the first time in a long time, we were starting to rebuild from a place of truth, not obligation, not guilt, not dependency, but honesty. That weekend marked a turning point. It was the first time all four of them came to visit me at my cottage by the ocean. Jennifer arrived with visible tension in her posture, her words cautious, her expressions guarded. But as she watched the children running barefoot along the shore, laughing, collecting seashells, and eagerly helping me water the garden, something in her began to soften. The strain between us didn't vanish, but it began to loosen its grip. We shared a simple dinner on the porch, nothing extravagant, just home-cooked food, shared stories, and the warm orange glow of the sun setting over the water. No catering, no elaborate decorations, no effort to impress. Just family, stripped of pretense, rediscovering what togetherness actually meant. As we cleared the dishes, Emma looked up at me, her voice curious and sincere. Grandma, she said, I like your house better than our old one. Oh? Why is that, sweetheart? She scrunched her nose, thinking, it feels happy here. I leaned down, brushing a lock of hair from her forehead. And how did the old house feel? She glanced over her shoulder at her parents, then whispered, kind of tense, like, Mom and Dad were worried all the time. Children see more than we give them credit for. Sometimes smaller is better, I told her. Not just houses, but lives too, less clutter, less worry. She nodded thoughtfully, and you have the ocean. That I do, I said with a smile. That evening, once the kids were asleep, tucked away in the guest room with windows open to let in the sea breeze, David, Jennifer, and I sat outside with glasses of wine. The conversation was uneven at first, dotted with long silences and small missteps, but it gradually warmed. There was laughter, there were small confessions, and eventually there was something that resembled connection. Jennifer spoke up unexpectedly, her voice tentative. The education trust for the children, she said. I don't think I ever properly thanked you. I gave a small nod. You don't need to thank me. I do, she insisted, looking me directly in the eyes. It means everything to know that no matter what happens, their education is secure, even if we're still finding our footing. David finished her sentence. It's a safety we couldn't give them on our own. They deserve it, I said, and I'm in a place now where I can give that without sacrificing myself. That's the difference. Jennifer hesitated, then added, visibly emotional, I'm sorry about Christmas, for excluding you, for acting as though your presence didn't matter. That was unkind. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. Thank you, Jennifer, I said quietly. When they left that Sunday afternoon, Emma wrapped her arms around me and looked up, hopeful. Can we come for Christmas, Grandma? Here at the beach? I turned to David and Jennifer, arching an eyebrow in silent question. David smiled. We'd love that, Mom, if the offer is still open. It is, I said, always. As their car disappeared down the winding road, a sense of peace settled over me. Quiet, profound, long overdue. It hadn't been an easy journey, but it was leading somewhere better. We were no longer bound by expectations or unspoken debts. We were learning how to be a family again, but this time on different terms. That night, I sat on my porch swing with a blanket draped over my knees, the stars beginning to prick the darkening sky, the waves whispering against the shore in steady rhythm. I thought about the decision I'd made just a few months earlier, to stop the flow of financial aid, to stop prioritizing everyone else's comfort over my own security. It had been terrifying. It had caused a rift, but it had also forced truth into the open. That choice had changed everything. I had learned that saying no doesn't mean closing your heart. Sometimes it's the only way to create space for something real. True love, I had come to understand, doesn't require invoices. True family doesn't hinge on silent sacrifice. And sometimes the most generous act is to stop enabling and start trusting others to stand on their own. As for me, I had built a new life. Simpler, yes, but rich in purpose. I had friends who showed up not for what I could give, but for who I was. I had time for myself, hobbies that brought me joy, peace and solitude. I had reclaimed my identity. At brunch that winter, Jennifer had once said bluntly, "We've decided not to invite you for Christmas." I'd nodded then, not knowing what to say. But when I quietly canceled the catering service and stopped paying their mortgage, suddenly the phone started ringing again. Invitations followed. Regret took shape. Sometimes it takes losing something to recognize its worth. They lost their safety net. I regained my dignity. And in that strange exchange, we all found something far more valuable than money, the chance to rebuild, not from guilt, not from fear, but from truth. This Christmas would be different. No grandeur, no excessive spending, just a simple tree, the scent of sea air, and the people who mattered most, not because they needed me to fund it, but because they wanted to share it, and I wouldn't miss it for the world.